That's the freedom dream that I think about why we have a Marsha, why we have a Bayard Rustin, why we have so many that came before us. And I think that goes in tandem of that reminder of like, girl, like if I just want to watch, here we go, y'all. If I just want to watch Love Island, I'm going to watch Love Island.
Once an episode, here it comes. That is my queer joy.
I got it. It is. Hi, everybody.
Guys, I'm so sore. I had like such a wild day. My partner got T-boned. Like someone ran a red light and like T-boned the car. And it happened like 2 miles from where I live. And I didn't want to wait for an Uber. So it was the hottest day of the year, 100 degrees. And I literally ran 2 miles without stopping. And I've never ran 2 minutes. And I was like, who is this superhero queer that came out? So like I get to the ambulance and I'm like, hey, are you okay? And my partner's like, yeah, I'm good. And I was like, I just ran 2 miles.
You're like, move over. I need some space in this bed.
She literally was like, do you need the ice pack that I have? I was like, I might. I really might, actually.
Everyone in the street was like, is that the Flash? No, that's just some gay boy running.
I didn't even have underwear on, so I don't know what that looked like in my little hands.
The thing was thangin'. You were running the dinosaur.
That's why everyone was staring. It's like, oh my gosh.
But no, I remember when you told us that was happening and like you were like literally rushing over there and I was like, oh my God, like hopefully everything's okay. But then like Evie made a great point in the meeting that we were in, like having a car in New York just feels wild. Like it does that. It feels like yet another reason to not have a car in New York because of the possibilities of that.
We got our car at the beginning of the pandemic. We drive just a Prius, a 2013 hybrid. And I do love the freedom of having it. And I love taking road trips. We just got back from Vermont. Like, I do think more people in New York have a car than you realize. They just don't live in Manhattan.
Is your car in the shop? Is because T-bone. What does T-bone mean?
That means she took it to the side. It's like the top was coming.
Yes, okay, that's what I thought. So is your car in the shop now?
Not yet. It's a whole thing. Because not only did she do that, but then this woman was not well. Okay, and so this is what we learn later on. So my partner rolls down the window because the woman comes up to her window and she slaps her across the face. Okay.
Wait, that woman that hit her.
That ran the red light, slapped her across the face.
What?
Okay, wild. This gets wild. And then leaves the scene and then calls her family who lives in the area and they all come back.
What?
And that's why I was running because my partner's like, the family just showed up and I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna have to fight. Like, so I'm like running. She's like hiding out in the back of the ambulance, but the family comes and they're like, yeah, unfortunately, like this is something she does. And she had 2 kids in the back seat, both unrestrained. And you could just tell they were really struggling. So unfortunately, it was wild. And someone called the police. The police never showed up. So the EMT is just like, we're hiding her in the back seat. So it was a lot.
And I'm like, there's police on every corner in New York City. Like, why did they not show up?
Do you know why? So we end up going to the police station to file a police report because our insurance company told us we had to. And we show up and they're all just sitting in there. Apparently, like half the cars didn't have AC, so they just decided they weren't going to work.
Oh,
girl, get your ass out on the street. Like, bring back some Lieutenant Dangle ass shorts. You better put on your little thigh slappers and you better fucking walk the street.
You have $1 billion budget and your cars don't have AC, but you're paying these people, $80 an hour. Get out of here. And the sergeant was like, we're busy. I was like, no, you're not. I'm not one of these people. I'm going to Karen you right here. You're about to take my police statement. Thanks very much.
I like that. I like that this whole story starts though with like, I'm so sorry. You're like, your partner got slapped in the face and T-boned in 90-degree weather, and you're like, and
this isn't her podcast.
I immediately clocked that too. I was like, yeah. So were you in the car?
All right, let's wrap this up because as Evie said today, we have a very special guest. Ryan, do you want to tell us who's joining us when we get back?
Oh my God, we have the legend, the moment. She is an author. She was also in the Times 100 Most Influential People. But recently, she's coming on the show to talk about her new book, Marsha, the Joy and Defiance of Marsha P. Johnson. Can't wait to have Tourmaline on the show.
Yeah, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
HighKey.
All right, y'all. Welcome back to HighKey.
Okay, so listen, there's been so much conversation around Americana recently. You know, shout out to Beyonce. But we have some complicated feelings around this holiday. And, you know, I think we've been asking ourselves, is there really anything to celebrate? And so I guess today we're going to dig into some big ideas, right, around America. And specifically, I think we should talk about Black America, our America, queer America, and really what that means, because it's all these things at all these different intersections. And so I'm excited, right, Ben?
Yes.
So excited.
Yes, and we're not doing it just us. We have someone really special here to help us dig in as well. Do you want to tell the audience who we have with us today?
You know, this person needs no introduction. This person is one of Time's 100 most influential people. I mean, they have worked with organizations from the Sylvia Rivera Law Project to Queers for Economic Justice. And I mean, they're an author. They're just kind of iconic. Evie, tell the people who's about to be here.
All right, y'all, please welcome to the show. Welcome to HighKey, Tourmaline.
Thank you so much for having me for the big ideas. My brain is feeling smooth but ready to dive in.
Honestly,
I've never heard a brain being described as smooth.
Oh,
you haven't heard of
smooth.
smooth brain?
No, I've never heard of that. I immediately thought about a baby, though.
Yes.
You know, I like that we've had Tourmaline. We've had you on for 2 seconds, and already, even with smooth brain, you are still teaching the kids some important shit.
Thank you. Thank you.
Like what smooth
Trying
brain
to rise
is.
to the occasion.
Well, we're going to talk about a little more than smooth rain today. You know, we're so excited to have you here today because
you.
when we talked about, we were like, oh man, we have an episode coming out the day before July 4th. And we knew we wanted to have a bit more of a nuanced conversation around the state of our country right now in this very unique and difficult moment. But especially as we think about it through the lens of queer history and our queer Black history.
That's right.
And of course, because we were talking about queer history and queer Black history, you were the first person who came to mind. You are a queer historian, and your new book, which I will hold up right here, is called Marsha, The Joy and Defiance of Marsha P. Johnson, which I just finished myself. It was so incredible to read it as a Black queer person, as an activist, and as a New Yorker, to read this book that is such a love letter to a real beginning of the queer liberation movement as we know it today. And I know for a fact that you are a Marsha P. Johnson, historian, and I have followed your work for so many years. And I, was right outside at the Brooklyn Museum when we were, it's 15,000 of us there celebrating, screaming for Raquel and all these other incredible leaders. So I know there's been a journey, but how did this book really come to be?
Yeah, so I have been blessed to be hot on the heels of Marsha P. Johnson's spirit for about 20 years. I moved to New York when I was 19 in 2002, and soon after found my life on the Christopher Street Piers, right? I was hanging out on all sorts of hours with other young people, and I joined this group Fierce, which was about young LGBTQIA plus people of color taking up space loudly and proudly, despite resident harassment, police intervention, a proposed curfew, like we were supposed to leave even though we were breathing life into this place. So for me, it was in that kind of organizing art context because we were fabulous, and we still are. But in that moment, I was learning about our fabulousness. People were talking about Marsha this and Marsha that, and I wanted to know, who is this person, Marsha? So I started to get close to the people who knew and loved her over a period of 20 years now. Whether it was Al Michaels, who is her nephew, who I met in 2011, or before that, Randy Wicker, her roommate and dear friend, or Augusto Machado, who was a street queen in Times Square in the early 60s alongside Marsha. To me, it was amazing to find this constellation of people who knew Marsha in different elements of her life. Jimmy Camicia, who was her director in Hot Peaches and who was in my film, Happy Birthday, Marsha. And I was just hot on the heels. And then I started to do some things like write about her and do teach-ins for my community. And I wrote when I was at the Sylvia Rivera Law Project, we did legal services for incarcerated members of our community. And we we had this newsletter called In Solidarity. And I was typing away, I learned this about Marsha. I learned this about Marsha. And I would get letters back from our community who were incarcerated. And they were like, girl, we knew Marsha. Just let us tell you about Marsha, right? And
just press record on the recorder and just let us talk.
Let us talk. And so it was this beautiful exchange. And what happens when you have that kind of aliveness is it's captivating for everyone. So what we're finding ourselves doing is reveling in the spirit, the full aliveness of Marsha. And so I started to make a film, Happy Birthday, Marsha, about Marsha. And it really culminated in 2020 with the starting of writing of this book, because I wanted all of that information, Marsha as performer, Marsha as organizer, Marsha as spiritual leader, Marsha as Jersey girl, right? She's from Elizabeth, New Jersey. I wanted it all to be in one place that feels accessible, right? And also to move through the world in that profound way, like Marsha moved through the world and continues to in a really deep way.
Yeah, I feel like the first time I found out about Marsha P. Johnson probably was like when I really started to be around more Black queer folks specifically, right? It was never at the intersection of like finding out about it because like, I don't know, I watched Bros or something and they were trying to do the straight 101 and let every straight person know who Marsha was. And so like when I think about Marsha P. Johnson, and especially at the time that she existed, Black queerness is so different in the ways that we discuss it now.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes I think about Marsha P. Johnson from a queer historical perspective of it oftentimes feels like, white people have kind of claimed her as theirs. And I always just wonder, to everybody, how does she show up for you all when it comes to like Black queer history? Because I essentially think of her as a Black queer, like,
that's right.
Person that is celebrated, that we should always, like, she's ours versus anyone else's.
Yeah. But part of the problem is that there are so many myths around Stonewall and around Marsha. And that's what I loved about the book is it was like an opportunity to be like, look, actually, some of what Marsha probably didn't throw the first brick. There might not have been any bricks at all, right?
You're not allowed to say on the internet, girl. Be careful.
I know, be careful. But in reality, it's like she did so much, actually a lot more than I even realized. And it's not that I don't want her to be remembered for the immense impact she made at the Stonewall riot.
Yeah.
But it also is just like, to me, there was so much more to her. And so, yeah, I do think she's ours. But like, I think we are sorely missing an opportunity to not just know her, but to know so many queer leaders from our past and to learn from them. So like we're talking about all these problems. Oh, we got to get our rights back. There were no trans bathroom bills because we didn't even have the word transgender at that time, right? And so for me, it's complicated. I do think that it is Black queer history, but I also think queer folks of color have a responsibility to do some more research, to learn a little bit more. And I'm thankful to people like you, Tourmaline, who are making it more accessible to do so.
Well, just for the Stonewall part too, it's, so many people saw Marsha play a huge role at Stonewall. And Marsha herself talked about Stonewall in two very different ways. So she talked about being in the backroom bar, which she often called the Black room bar, because that's where people of color, Black queens, were, pushed. There was the white Stonewall where there was gilded cages and go-go dancers, right? And it was a mafia-owned bar. So they funneled more affluent white people to the front room. And in the back room, there was a jukebox, there was circle dancing, there was Marsha getting her life when they would let her in the Stonewall. So Marsha remembered with complete recall the song that was playing on the Stonewall riots night. Marvin Gaye heard it through the grapevine on the jukebox as Seymour Pine, the NYPD officer, led the raid at 1:20 a.m. And then a lot of people saw Marsha being among the first to fight back, right? There's just person after person after person, brick or not, right? And then Marsha, later in the 80s, talked about not getting to Stonewall later, right, till 2 a.m. And in part, the context of those comments was Stonewall happened, this is Marsha, Stonewall happened in August on my birthday. I didn't get there till later. and they moved the date. I don't know why they moved it to June to celebrate it. Maybe it was about...
Yeah, she said, on my birthday is quite disrespectful because I'm trying to celebrate me versus
Literally.
y'all. Like I know she was
You know what I'm saying?
the one being like, how dare you, FAG?
Yes. So it's this beautiful way that she is like, no, Stonewall was in August, right? And most of us know and remember Stonewall is in June. So there's a level of, well, why is she talking about Stonewall being in August? Well, by the time that she was making those comments, she had lived a lot. She had a bullet in her back for 11 years, right? She was living a life filled with, yes, thriving and glamour and beauty, but she was surviving trauma every day. The world outside for Marsha was quite a harsh place. That's why she had to dream so big. It wasn't because she had born into the lap of luxury. It was because she needed to dream beyond the harsh conditions she was immediately met with by the time she was 18, moving to Times Square in 1963 and getting a 13-year-old Sylvia Rivera up into an hourly hotel to have a little bit of space of relief from the police, right?
Yeah.
So Marsha was speaking through time. It was this malleable thing. And I think, to me, the book is about, well, let's dive in the lore and let's also have a kind of disability justice lens, right? And understand that, like, Stonewall wasn't a sane event. It was a maddening event. We need to love our mad queens, including our mad queens like Marsha, who's like, no, Stonewall was in August, I'm a Virgo. Or, yes, I was in the back room, dancing to Marvin Gaye. All of it needs to be this expansive thing. And to me, that's who Marsha was, right? And that's what the joy and part of writing this book was. It was about telling Black queer history, right? Black trans history for our people, for our audience, and also saying, like, we also get to be maddening and mad and incoherent and complicated and contradicting. And that's actually part of the beauty of us.
I really appreciate that aspect of visiting a story that I would otherwise say is easily glossed over. You know, to go back to an earlier point, I learned about Marsha P. Johnson in the same fashion that I learned about Martin Luther King, which is there was this person who did exist and they did great things and then they died.
Right.
And that's what you get of the story, and a part of their greatness is cemented in everything that happened from this one point and then going forward. So I would question, how do you encourage people to look at our historical figures more three-dimensionally, especially since queer history is something that has to be sought out and passed down?
You know, there's this incredible writer, Saidiya Hartman, who writes a lot about the transatlantic slave trade, right, and the archive, and how, you know, our archives aren't these neutral places. Oftentimes, you know, for those of us who are descendants of enslaved people, we aren't in those archives, right? Or our names might only be on the ledger of an insurance book that was insuring a slave ship that went down, right? And what we need to do is breathe life into our lineage. And sometimes that means channeling, right? Sometimes that means accessing all of our spiritual tools. And also for Marsha, you know, I was blessed to know people who knew her. So I got to learn about how, you know, Marsha showed up for and learned from the Black Panther Party. She took over New York University, did an occupation 2 weeks after the Revolutionary People's Convention in 1970, September, in Philadelphia, largely organized by the Black Panther Party. That inspired her. So that connection between Black liberation and Marsha has always been there. And so to me, part of the joy of learning more about Marsha is like, oh, I see you. Like, you have been creating this space for me, and I see the imprints. You know, she was born in Elizabeth in a time when they were organizing around the segregation of Howard Johnson. She took her last name, Johnson, from Howard Johnson. Yeah. She was deeply influenced by Black liberation, the civil rights movement, and she knew exactly what was going on.
Do y'all think back in that time, especially because you see these like archival clips of Marsha and Sylvia and them on this stage, do y'all think they had to like code switch to make their message accessible, to like actually get people to hear them? I think about how Black queer folks, especially us who are behind a mic and it can have a proximity to whiteness oftentimes that can push us forward and give us access and all these things. I think about it from a Marsha P. Johnson's lens where I'm like, is that something you think she had to worry about? Or did she think about that?
Didn't she do the opposite? Like, I kind of think of her as someone who actually like understood the performance that she was giving every single day when she like stepped out into the world. But she like leaned the other, it's like Evie Oddly. She leaned the other way. She like leaned into it. So like instead of code switching, it felt to me almost like she was more intentionally like sort of ratchet to just be like, I'm not going to code switch. I'm going to like lean into the absurdity. And it was like sort of this reclamation of like, we don't have to be the perfect queer image. There's that famous video of her and it's just like, she's not trying to impress this, interviewer. She couldn't care less. Yeah. And so I almost think there's something. I think there's something. We'll play it right here. Producer Jenna will throw that in for you. But it's like, I almost feel like it's looking to the leaders of our past is more permission because they weren't trying to live within these structures. They weren't trying to pass and change laws necessarily. Right. Like
Depending
they were trying
on which
to survive.
leaders you're thinking about. I do think there were leaders that were actually thinking like, in a very, Sarah McBride type of way that we've discussed on the show, we have to make sure everyone else is kind of comfortable so we can get into the space and get into the room and then pursue what we're trying to do.
I would argue that there definitely were leaders, but I think the more important thing about how culture worked differently is every person out on this planet, and especially in these disenfranchised communities, definitely did not feel like you had the ability to be a leader. Whereas I think social media has given all of our voices some purpose, some strength. It's why it's kind of hilarious to me that we're in another swing of the cycle where, trans hate is growing. And I'm like, you guys realize you did this by allowing me to have a camera in my hand, right?
It's like, you actually gave me the visibility.
Yeah, girl. And I'm not, you can't stomp us out anywhere, anymore.
We're not going
That
anywhere.
is so smart.
Like, your kid is going to see trans people.
Literally, your kid is going to see trans people. One of my favorite, audio clips of Marsha kind of within this conversation is when it's 1971 and she has recently started going on hormone replacement therapy, right? And a few years later, she was identifying as a pre-op transsexual woman. That's her words, right? And in 1971, she's like, she's on estrogen. She's like, I got a handful. She's talking about her breasts. It's not a big handful, but it's still a handful. And you can like hear the joy. And, and then Sylvia's in the background being like, because Marsha's talking about, I always used to know how to be a woman because my mother was, taught me how to sew and to do domestic work. And Sylvia's like, that's so disrespectful. And Marsha's like, actually, my mother was a poor Black woman. Like, she had to do these things. She didn't have other people. And I modeled my womanhood after my mom, right? Alberta Michaels. And so to me, I think it's really, and you can hear they're having an argument. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not.
Yeah, you hear the tension. You hear the tension in the conversation. The dolls are dolling.
The dolls are dolling. And then, a couple years later, in 1973, they did another, it's with WBAI, which is a local New York radio station. They did another radio, and this one's like 2 hours long. And they're talking about just being evicted from Star House. They made this organization, Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries. And it was profound. Like, they wrote a manifesto fighting for childcare alongside gender-affirming care, alongside free tuition at universities like NYU. And that was right after the Revolutionary People's Convention. They were really inspired by the Black Panther Party, right? And the young lords. But so in the conversation, they were just evicted and they were talking about their trials and tribulations and about not being able to live together. And Marsha's like, I will never live with any of y'all ever again. Like, I'm sad we were evicted, but hell no, I'm going to have my own place. None of y'all are going to live with me ever again.
If that is not a part of the universal queer experience,
exactly.
I swear.
Decades later, we still hate our fucking roommates. Can I ask you, though, about Star?
Yeah.
Because Street Transvestites for Gay Power, you talked about that manifesto they wrote. I'm just going to read like a tiny little blurb from October 1970, because they titled it Gay Power, When Do We Want It or Do We? And I just like have been so, they wrote, this is the question that runs through our minds. Do you really want gay power, or are you looking for a few laughs and maybe a little excitement? We're not quite sure what you people really want. If you want gay liberation, then you're going to have to fight for it. We don't mean tomorrow or the next day. We're talking about today. We can never possibly win by saying, wait for a better day, or we're not ready yet. If you're ready to tell people that you want to be free, then you're ready to fight.
Yeah.
And my question to you is, do you feel like, and I'm not talking about everyone, because there are queers in the streets every single day, but when I think about the community, do you feel like we fight anymore? Or do you feel like we've just think that like things are going to change just because we asked them to? Like, I feel like we've lost the fight. I'll say it.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes so much sense, especially because you can't in this moment, like, open a screen, turn on the news, go outside without being really confronted by the harsh conditions that our community is facing, right? Like, it is abundant in terms of, you know, how intense of a landscape that we have to navigate, right? And that's not different from Marsha's moments. And that's why she had to dream so big, like we were talking about. Like in those hourly hotels, and they called them hot spring hotels, you know, like she was forced to dream of a world that was big enough to show respect, put some respect on her name, right? For her to know her beauty every time she walked outside, because other people knew it too. And so to me, I think now when we're faced with similar conditions, like it is so important that we know that we're in a landscape that's malleable, right? Like we can change it. Like these are, just because we arrived at this moment and it is what it is, doesn't mean that we can't collectively organize. And I think for me, I was blessed to be in organizing spaces for, you know, since I was, you know, moved to New York as a teenager, whether it was Fierce or Queers for Economic Justice or Silver Law Project. Like I really learned from the leaders how you change things. You gather together, you harness your energy, you make your demands, you disrupt business as usual, you make it really clear that you're not going anywhere. My chosen trans mother, Miss Major Griffin Gracie, you know, is always saying, I'm not going any fucking where, right? We're still fucking here. She says it all the time. It's so profound. And so to me, that's the kind of energy that we need right now, right? That like, we're not going anywhere. We're abundant in how we are facing and showing up and showing out. And part of it's dreaming, part of it's organizing, part of it is nourishing each other. Part of it's learning about our leaders and making sure that our elders are still feeling cared for, you know? So,
I would go out on a limb and say I think that our elders are possibly the key to having a successful queer future. I know every conversation eventually has to turn to how not only our government, our country, but kind of the world handled the first queer epidemic.
Right.
And we did lose an entire generation right after, you know, beginning to make strides in fighting for queer liberation. We lost a vision of how the future looks. So my question for you is, with an aging queer population that's still here and still killing it, like, what do you think we should seek out from our elders and how?
You know, one of the things that I've been blessed with, and it's just abundant, like, of knowing about the past, is hearing stories from, you know, like Miss Major. So Miss Major was a firm leader in the emerging HIV/AIDS crisis, right? She started this group called Angels of Care because trans people weren't being employed, right? Black trans women were not being employed. And also people were living with and dying from HIV/AIDS and needed care. So she was like, well, I'm going to make sure that my girls are hired to be caretakers for people who are, you know what I'm saying? So she created this organization.
2 dolls, 1 stone.
That's right. Angels of Care.
Absolutely.
And it was so
Except
profound.
we were keeping them alive instead of killing them.
That's exactly,
Well, yes.
That's right.
Important distinction.
Important distinction. And so to me, it was really beautiful to think about, you know, to just learn at every moment how someone like Miss Major really rose to the occasion. she had a desire to offer greater care. She had a desire to make sure that her girls, her sisters were also able to live, alongside everybody else. And so she was an innovator, just like Marsha. And she's doing it all the time. She didn't stop, then she created, in Little Rock, Arkansas, a retreat space for the community to go to and just be able to have, just like those hot spring hotels, those hourly hotels, a little bit of safety, right, from the violence that's going on so that we can arrive at a different vantage point. Like, oh, I am powerful. I really learned that from her. And then there was like the day-to-day stuff that I learned from her. Like, this is about 20 years ago. She's like, a group of us are all gathered to listen to her. And she's like, things like, if you're being chased down the street, it might be scary because everyone's looking at you, but do not go into an alley because you actually need to be where all the other people can see what's happening so that that one person that might be available to intervene can intervene. And that really meant a lot to me because at the time, early on, I was like, so clocking who's noticing what, like when am I safe, and wanting to shrink myself and make myself small. And she was saying, like, actually, for your survival in this moment, you need to be in a crowded place where hopefully that one person will intervene. Don't go split off from the group. And so it's just those concrete stories, but also those concrete life lessons and that our leaders, our elders hold all the time. And so the kind of care that we want to be showing for our leaders who are elders is immense, right? Because she continues to innovate. She continues to approach a world as like that problem is creating a solution. And I'm going to tell each and every one of you what the solution is.
Yeah, and you mentioned freedom earlier and dreaming. And in 2020 of July 2020, you actually wrote an article about freedom dreaming in Vogue.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know, one, could you explain what that is?
Yeah.
And then two, how has that changed 5 years later when you think about the current state of where we are currently?
Yeah, so when I was a student at college, this is over 20 years ago, I was lucky to have an advisor, a professor, and be the research assistant of Robin D.G. Kelley, who really coined the term freedom dreaming, right, as a term that people in the Black liberation movement, also sometimes known as the civil rights movement, used in order to look at conditions and arrive at strategies to change the world. Freedom dreaming. We know what we don't want. That gives us clarity about what we do want. Let's imagine a world filled with what we do want and organize to get there. That's kind of the basic premise of freedom dreaming. Sometimes it can be really small, right? It can be like, I know that I'm not feeling very beautiful. I want to be around a community because I'm feeling really isolated right now that knows like trans Black beauty, right? It can be as simple as that, right? Which then we realize that's pretty profound. In this landscape, that's actually a huge freedom dream to have our beauty reflected in a real way, in a consistent way. And how does it show up? Like, well, let's create some strategies. Reese Beach, right? Like, like Black Pride at Reese Beach. I remember in like 2005 when that changed my life. Black Pride at Reese Beach. That was so powerful. Or like Soul Summit in those early days in Fort Greene Park. And I don't know. So to me, it's just been a consistent practice that we all do all the time, maybe without even noticing it. We know what we don't want. We have a little bit of clarity then about what we do want. And then we can start to imagine a world filled with that and move in the direction of it. And so Robin D.G. Kelley he wrote a profound book about freedom dreaming. And to me, I wanted to make sure that my communities, like my sisters, my siblings, we all had access to this framework and we start to implement it every day. And so today, the conditions are even more intense, right? Like, so our dreams need to be even larger, and we need to make sure that we're not just doing them in isolation, we're doing them in community. So it goes back to the elder conversation, right? Like, I can learn from Miss Major because Miss Major continues to offer wisdom and accept care. And the care needs to increase for Miss Major as she ages, right? So that we can continue to revel in her spirit and just bask in all of who she is. So that's part of freedom dreaming.
Yeah.
What's your freedom dream for America, Tourmaline?
What's your freedom dream for America?
liberation
Yeah.
in all of the sense. You know, I remember I first learned your name after Layleen Polanco was killed in at Rikers Island.
Yeah.
And a friend of yours and I were talking about just we have to tell this story. We have to do something.
That's
And
right.
I bring up the criminal legal system because I think it's such an immense example of what's wrong with our system.
That's right.
Is that we punish and we create punitive responses to systemic issues.
That's right.
And we don't solve problems. We keep pushing people down. And so when I freedom dream for America, I think of a world in which like everyone just can get by without the fear of getting by.
Yeah.
And I think about how Marsha died, and for so long they tried to pretend that she wasn't murdered. But we know Black trans people and trans folks of all races truly are at risk. I have a white trans woman partner, and she is also at risk, right? And so I just dream of a world in which like we don't have to live by fear. I feel like fear motivates almost everything that we do. And I often say, if you can make someone feel, you can make someone do anything.
Yeah.
And I just want to start moving from a different feeling that's not fear. And maybe it's anger. But like you've said in many interviews, that anger can lead to our joy and can lead to our prosperity.
That's right. Anger can give such profound relief from fear. It's so important to not disregard anger, right? Like a lot of times in the conversations around joy, we put joy on a pedestal and every other emotion, as less than. There is literally no hierarchy. If we're feeling fear, I really encourage people to like have some revenge fantasies. You don't have to act on all of them, but at least let yourself have some.
Girl,
because you might
not
find
you talking about my sex life in
Yes,
this bitch.
okay. Literally. But it's so important. Like, you need relief. You don't deserve to live in fear, right? So what's a great tool to give yourself some relief from it? Have a revenge fantasy. You don't need to act it out, but it can give you a feeling of empowerment, right? It can help inspire a new desire that might take you to a greater place of clarity. And so to me, absolutely, like, the freedom to not live in fear is primary. I think that's something that Marsha was doing, and leading around all the time.
Or at least like the freedom to live in fear of the same stupid shit that everyone else is, like, oh no, those kids are hanging out on my lawn.
Right.
Those are the fears we deserve.
Who has a lawn?
Oh yeah, I forgot you're like solidly in New York City. You've never even seen grass, have you, girl?
But also, like, I can't, but you look at housing and you look at all of these other systems. And, you were talking about the permission that Marsha created for so many others. I also look at Zohran Mamdani, not a trans person, not a queer person, but is still a result of the organizing of Black queer people, is still a manifestation of what New York has been and will become. And like, Marsha created space for so many other folks. And it's time we start putting some respect on her damn name.
That's right.
And you do it so beautifully. And I also want to talk about Miss Majors, because you were talking about how she was saying, don't hide in the alley. One interpretation of that is like, your safety is your visibility. Like, how do we build safety for queer folks? Is by being visible.
Yeah.
Even if that's visibly watching me get my ass beat, I'm going to do it while queer, and I'm going to be visible, because that is the only thing that can actually bring our safety. It won't be the fear, and it won't be hiding.
Yeah, it's
it
a
will
shame
be finding our
is
bricks
counter
and
to it.
throwing them.
Exactly. She was really helping me leave a place of shame, because I was so every day would wake up feeling so ashamed of myself, right? And part of that was just like receiving so many messages about who I was and taking them in, taking like that as truth. And she and Marsha and so many really helped unlock that for me. So
how do we, and this might sound rude, but how do we as queers of color, remind people that our lives are fun and way better than theirs, and that if they join us, they can have some of this fun too?
Because Marsha said nobody's straight.
Girl,
she did say it.
Trisexuals.
And that was also to your earlier point about what is your freedom dream. That's actually a part of my freedom dream.
Oh, please tell us.
Is this world of like us not having to be like, activists.
Yeah.
Not having, 'cause those are essentially our world, like those are war wounds.
Yes.
And like, there needs to be a moment in time where all of us at our different intersections can just simply exist and like walk through this world and actually not have it inform, like our trauma inform the way we walk through the world.
Yes.
And like that's the freedom dream that I think about why we have a Marsha, why we have a Bayard Rustin, why we have so many that came before us. And I think that goes in tandem of that reminder of like, girl, like if I just want to watch, here we go, y'all. If I just want to watch Love Island, I'm going to watch Love Island.
Once an episode, here it comes.
That is my queer joy.
I got it.
Yes.
It is, you know.
Well, okay, can I ask another question for the group then?
Yeah, yes.
Kind of building off of that, since, a lot of representation isn't just saying, I'm here to represent. It's about being. So what is bringing your queer ass some queer joy right now? Like when you see it and you're like, oh my God, that just brought me so much like seenness, feltness. I wish I could have. I love this. Like what is giving you queer euphoria? What's making you queer come?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Well, yes. You could have stopped at Euphoria, but we went the extra mile. And I really appreciate
What would make
it.
the queer climax? Yeah.
That's it. That's the
precipice. Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to go first because I already know my answer's like porn. And that's such a lame place to start.
That.
That's such a
not
low
lame
bar.
At all.
If I'm being honest, like, and this might sound cliche, but literally, I had my first weekend that wasn't tied to work, that wasn't tied to like having an obligation. It was just simply like hanging out with friends and getting drunk.
Yeah, that's right. That's literally.
It was like I hadn't experienced that, especially during a month that is Pride Month, and like it's kind of like, when you're corporate gays or when you're like pride gays, you are always kind of, this is a part of the job.
Yes.
It was just simply nice to just like look around me and be with like people that I just loved.
Yes.
And like even playing like, my video games at nights, like that is all giving me like joy when I can simply like close this laptop, turn off my phone.
That's right.
And just like think of something completely different than what's actually happening in the world. And that's not necessarily saying, disconnect and not keep up, because I think we have a sort of a duty about it, but I no longer feel shame or guilt around disassociating.
Yeah.
Around
like, you can't make me feel that in 2025.
That's
it. That's actually, I really like that because let me PG-13 up my answer from before. It's not pornography as much as I like the act of taking time to literally ask myself, what is going to feed my desire right now?
That's right.
And it's usually some really queer shit. Like a lot of the times it's, paint my nails or
that's what I was going to say too.
Shave my kneecaps.
Yeah.
Oh, is that really yours?
Yeah,
Okay,
no,
I wanna
really,
hear
literally.
to the full T then.
Yeah. No, I mean.
Is it painting your nails?
Yeah, no, I'm just, I think right now, like because I'm on book tour, there's a lot of moving around. So finding the moments of queer joy, like I play a lot of Mario Kart.
Taste.
So like
I have a Nintendo Switch Lite.
Yes.
So yes.
Okay. And I just play on there's a version on the phone. So I just every day I'm like literally playing hours of Mario Kart, and it makes me so happy. Like honestly. And so I play a lot of Mario Kart. I love like having my nails really long right now, and just like getting them done iridescent, like the opulence of them, having them taking up a lot of space. I remember I did, like learned about Marsha going to the Uptown Beauty department stores and bringing all the dolls with her. This was at a time when that was completely unheard of, right? But they would go from counter to counter at like a Macy's when this was like the early 70s, and they'd be like, no, you're gonna beat my face. Like, we're gonna find out what colors work for what. Like, we're gonna try on all the lipstick. And it's that's not the being in the streets organizing activism or the petition. But to me, like, that is one of the most profound things that Marsha did is like brought people to a place that was about enhancing their understanding of beauty through makeup and glamour, through glitter, and having everyone leave that place filled with more pleasure and a deeper knowing of their own value. Like, to me, that's what happens when I get my nails done or I get my makeup done, or I just am like, oh, wait. I like stare I'm like, oh, I'm really beautiful. Like, I didn't know, like, putting on some lashes would change my life. You know what I'm saying?
There's actually a moment in your book where you talked about, and it kind of came up for me earlier when you were talking about Miss Major and the retreats, and how Marsha P. Johnson, they would like go to the hourly hotels just to get off the streets so they could just relax. And I feel like that is all a part of that lineage, right?
That's
like that it was that at that time, it was her way of, thinking and dreaming of a bigger future while also connecting with the community around her that also put in for this hourly hotel,
and resting.
That's right.
Yeah,
rest.
Celebrating rest.
Exactly.
Queer rest.
That's
protect
right.
queer rest.
That's
protect trans rest.
That's right.
Exactly. And queer beauty and queer joy. Like my thing that's bringing me the like queer happiness are all the people in my neighborhood who are just like being themselves, who are just dressing queerly, who are expressing themselves in very queer ways. And then I love when you give each other the look, and I'm not talking about the cruising look, Evie, but it's very similar, where you're just like, oh, you're queer too. Hey, hey girl, you do you.
One eye is like, I see you, sister, and the other eye is like, but I can see even more of you if you follow me.
Evie's pointing with the eyes. I'm saying, hey, girl, I see you.
That's right.
Oh, awkward silence. We love that moment. I think I wanted to ask one more question.
Yeah.
And we kind of got to it because we were talking about future dreaming, but I'm just thinking like, let's future dream for queers specifically, because that's really like, at the end of the day, I like, who are going to be the leaders? Is it you, Tourmaline? Like, who are going to be the leaders that lead us into the future, and what could that future look like
and
for
do you
queer
even
people?
want to do that? That is
exactly.
Right.
Who's the next Marsha? Like, where does that legacy? Who continues that legacy?
Well, part of what I thought Marsha's teaching was, she used to talk a lot about the voice in her head and be in conversation with God. And I know for a lot of us who are queer and we have different relationships with, faith and faith institutions that could make us feel horrible, or maybe we still practice inside them. And so, but Marsha used to talk really specifically about following the voice in her head. Like she said, she almost didn't graduate high school, and then she got in a big fight with her mom, and then she, made an agreement with God. She said, if you let me finish high school, I'll go out into the queer community and learn what really is going on. So she couldn't even imagine a God that didn't want her to do that, right? At such a young age. She was 18. That's the conversation she had with God. And then she said, in a different moment, like, something in my head just told me to, go into Times Square and go into the queer community. And that's where she met, like, the people that she would know for decades to come, like Sylvia Rivera, right? Times Square really was the place to be in that moment. And then something in her head led her downtown, right, to the West Village. And then she followed that stream all the time. And so to me, I think what that's saying is like, Marsha had a connection to her intuition, to her ancestor, to spirit, to God, that I think we all have access to. I firmly believe there's not like one leader. I think we all are connected to this stream, this limitless stream that we can tune to, and we can tell how close we are or how far we are based on how we feel. When we're feeling a lot of clarity and enthusiasm, like this conversation right now, I think we're really tapped in, right? That's why the questions are flowing and the answers are flowing. So I think it's not one person, but I really believe, like, part of the mission of the book, like the secret mission, is for people to understand, like, oh, we all have this connection. I too can calibrate to this greater sense of who I really am and offer an answer and have great timing and also be funny and also take a break and also be all of who I am by being glamorous if I want, being demure if I want, like all of it. We all can do that. And so my real true hope with both Marsha, the adult book, and One Day in June, the children's book, is for us to know, like, there doesn't have to be a leader. When you look at the sky and birds are flying all together, there's not a leader bird. they're all just tuned to the same like stream of intuition, right? Like we don't have to have a leader bird. We can just be like in our own little flock, right? You know what I mean?
Let's just flock together.
Let's flock together, right?
And learn from each other while doing it. Like what? That's the formation of the birds really clicks for me. You kind of
because that's instinctual. They just fly like that in that formation, in that queer energy.
And they
people
transition.
And people are always like, oh, the chemistry of HighKey is so strong. It's like, because we're tapping into our bird energy, baby.
That's it. That's the whole
You got bird
thing.
flu because we are sick.
Yeah, we got bird flu because we're sick with the bird energy.
We really appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. This will not be the last moment that you come on this show. I know that for sure.
Thank you. That means a lot to me.
This will not be the last moment you queer climax on the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, yes.
And for everyone listening, the bestseller, Marsha, the Joy and Defiance of Marsha P. Johnson, is available wherever you get your books or audiobooks. And truly, it is worth every second of the read. And there's some pictures in the middle, too, if you like pictures. It was fun to see a young Marsha P. Johnson. So there you go.
The archives.
The archives.
Thank you. I'm really emotionally moved by this conversation. This has been the pinnacle conversation that I've had in this entire time since putting out the book. Like, this really means a lot to me that you would make space to include me, and that we could also just like get into, you know, not just the activism, but our dreams, and not just our dreams, but like, what are we doing for fun? And remember, like, you know, we are all flying together. So thank y'all for like making the invitation for me.
Just know we are obsessed with you.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm using we statements for that because it's all true. And it's so important, the work that you do and you simply existing. And so thank you for being the example. Thank you for being a historian, and just thank you for being you. Seriously, we are besties. We're locked in.
Locked in. Thanks, y'all.
HighKey.
All right, welcome back, F words.
Speaking of that, actually, not even to throw it off, I was listening to an Armchair Expert episode, and Brad Pitt was on there, and around 30, because I time coded it, around 30 minutes and 50 seconds, he was talking about growing up in the Ozarks and how, like, at that time when he was growing up, like, like, it was all about masculinity and boys shouldn't be boys. He casually says fag, and no one said anything. And I was like, Brad Pitt just iconically saying fag right now, and no one's going to react to it. It's kind of crazy.
No one's gonna react to it because they're not trying to draw attention to it. It's like yelling about piss porn on the internet and being like, everybody look at this piss porn, when really you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I have this piss porn. Like, who isn't wanting to get called a fag by Brad Pitt?
I just kept thinking about, like, it was such a huge deal when fucking Gayle King said faggotry, and she was quoting a joke back to Mateo Lane, and like Brad Pitt, no one even in the comments said anything. I was like, I had to listen to it like 30 times. I heard it, and I sent it to a couple other people, and they were like, yep, he said it. I was like, okay, work.
It's not blowing up because then everybody would have to blow up their likes on Twitter again. They'd have to be like, okay, so actually I watched this video over and over again, and that was my queer climax for the day.
I don't even know. It was kind of crazy. I was so conflicted.
Is that your HighKey moment of the week? Brad Pitt saying
that's
fag?
not even. I'm going to actually give my HighKey moment of the week to someone that actually deserves it, not him. So my HighKey goes to Heightened Screwenty. It's a doc from Sam Feder that follows Chase Strangio's SCOTUS fight for trans rights and access to healthcare. And as we all know, if you have been paying attention, I believe on the 22nd or the 26th, one of those. Oh no, today's the 26th that we're recording this. But the 22nd is when they actually came out with the response to this journey and fight. But I went to the LA screening premiere, and I finally got to see this documentary, and it's a follow-up to Disclosure 2, which is on Netflix. And so if you are familiar and you've watched it, it's about just Disclosure was about trans representation in media and television, and Heightened Scrutiny really looks at it from a media and journalism perspective, and so many queer and trans journalists are narrating and being talking heads to kind of guide us through the history of like trans when it all flipped on its head, and then you see Chase Strangio on this fight and this journey, and I'm just so impressed and so happy that I live in the same timeline as a Chase Strangio, because he just is so smart. And the fact that he mentioned in the documentary, and this isn't like a spoiler, but he said, for folks that like do this work and who are lawyers, their whole entire like dream is to like talk before the Supreme Court. And he was like, I actually never wanted to do this, and I hate this. And to know that that actually is what it takes to do this fight and to lead. And this documentary was just so beautiful. There's so many beautiful folks that are a part of it. Tre'vell Anderson is one of them, and I'm just very, very touched and obsessed with that documentary. And even though we knew the outcome, it did not take away from the fight and the courage and the hope to move forward. So that is what I'm high-key obsessed with this week.
HighKey. Okay, bitch. Well, then I guess to follow that with something equally touching and deep.
That's my job. What?
I know. I'm sorry I'm stealing your part, but like what I'm really high-key obsessed about this week is 28 years later.
Yes.
Which I had no clue because you brought this up before. I had no clue what that was until I looked it up recently and saw that, it was a zombie movie.
You've never watched the franchise?
No, I've never seen the franchise.
Ryan, you don't strike me as a horror girly.
Thank you so much. I take that as the highest of compliments, because
I wasn't either.
Not.
But Maddie got me into horror movies. I've seen every horror movie you could think of.
That's exactly the vibe, though, right? You have the vibe of somebody who's like, hell no, I'm not like scaring myself for fun. And Ben, you have the vibe of like, no, I don't really want to scare myself for fun, but I do have a partner who loves that chaotic shit.
Exactly, and wants to watch me scared and cry.
I mean, the closest to that for me is The Last of Us. And like did I finish?
I couldn't finish season 2.
I don't even think I finished season 2.
It's it was kind of hard, but honestly, that's The Last of Us really has a lot of the precedent of the vibe of why I loved 28 Years Later so much. It's amazing to see something that is as overdone as zombie movies in general, like where we go in with these expectations. There's going to be a father trying to save his kids. There's going to be lots of scary zombies. It's more about the zombies. And I think what 28 Years Later has done is kind of what The Last of Us did. And it puts you in a world where there are zombies, but bitch, it is not about the zombies. It's about like these deeply human stories that make you cry. And I don't want to spoil anyone who hasn't seen it by now, but I am going to get my next neck tattoo because of that movie. So get ready. I'm going to memento mori and then memento amore.
Right over the
on
Vivo
my throat.
So going from faggotry to zombies
to
Latin zombie references.
Has the franchise always been 28 years? Like is it just going to like? And so we're even further into even 28 years later from the last 28 years.
So this is being held as kind of the beginning of a new trilogy, even though this is the third movie that's come out
under the same title.
Sort of, yeah. So the first one was like 28 days later, and it looked at one guy's journey moving through this initial zombie outbreak in 28 days. And then there was 28 weeks later, which was this story about society trying to rebuild after a crazy zombie epidemic. And then we've gotten to 28 years later, which is society functioning. What's really interesting, no spoils about it, but like what's interesting is it does a really good job of setting us where we are right now. Like it explains how there could be phones and like people chilling and TikToking at a time where there's also somewhere in the world where zombies are just running wild. So go see it if you like crying or laughing and it's not even that scary. Okay, so this is for you. It is not even that scary. You are going to cry more than you scream.
I mean, that's just a piece of culture that I'll let you all tell me about.
Oh,
Or maybe we do it together.
Do
I
you
don't
watch
know.
The Purge?
Let's
Do
do
you
it.
watch anything that's in that realm?
Not really. I have seen The Purge halfway through. The scariest movie that I ever saw, if I'm being quite honest, was Insidious and The Conjuring. But I was dragged to the theaters for that. Like my friends all wanted to go, and I was going to have way too much FOMO if I didn't go. And so that's kind of like the extent of horror movies for me. Like I just can't do it because I'm screaming.
I need you to see this though. The scream is whatever. Like we can get some pillows, but like I mostly just want to show you the beauty in horror. Like what is, and I like it when a horror movie can actually be tailored for people who are not into horror. And that's what I loved about this movie is it was an action movie. It was a romance in parts. It was a love story. It was about humanity.
It was Sinners.
Every now and it was Sinners. And every now and then they'd be like, "Look at that scary thing over there. Don't worry, you can choose to look away right now. This is a scary part." It wasn't like some jump scare, like, "Boo, this is happening right now, and because you watch this movie, you're dying in 7 days."
Well, yes. Okay. All right. Well, I'll think about it. Maybe for your birthday or something, I'll watch it.
Well, speaking of birthdays, my HighKey is just me being HighKey excited for my 31st birthday, which is going to be, I think, 3 days after when people are actually listening to this. But I'm turning 31, and I'm just like having complicated feelings. I know this is the small overlap of time where we're the same age for like a couple of weeks.
Just
all of us will be 31 for like a moment. So maybe that will be like a time where we have all of our numerological power. Also, by the way, speaking of numerology, I talked about Zohran Mamdani and how I hoped that he would win the Democratic nomination for New York City mayor. He has at this point.
Sure has.
And I'm really, 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 really excited about it. And I'm feeling like very inspired by that as well. Maybe high-key inspired. I'm like, should I run for office? Because there was a time where I was going to run for office. I remember when I was working on the Warren campaign and she didn't go and do fundraisers. So they would send people out. And so I went out and I did the fundraiser in Los Angeles. I did my little stump speech about growing up poor and my fridge breaking, whatever. And Adam Scott and Elizabeth Banks fucking come corner me after this event. And they're like, "We decided you're running for office." And I was like, "I don't think I'm going to do that." And now I'm like, I don't know, maybe I should. Like, maybe if you can be Zohran Mamdani and run as a democratic socialist and have this like economic populist agenda, like I could do that. I could actually do that. So I don't know.
It's kind of funny because I hella see that for you in general. You know, we've talked before about how I totally see you as like a TRL host in the year 2005, and you're like, "What's up, guys? It's
Hey
Ben,
guys,
and
Ben
this
O'Keefe
week
here for MTV."
Exactly. Like I see that as
And it was almost me. I know.
Both of you. I see that for both of you, but also specifically, Ben, for you. I do see you just in the way that like you are so politically minded. You're so like passionately motivated about big ideas. Like I see you being a politician.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I see you. I see you like going after this though. When you when you learn how to stop bugging people.
I just the thing that's
politics
hard
is bugging people.
But
Don't you still get text messages from Kamala Harris
But
asking for coin?
But it's hard because you don't get to bring your full self. You have to play this character, and that's what I didn't want to do. Is I didn't want to like talk with my thumb. Sasha, Michelle, Malia, and I. We like all this fun. Like I remember Warren. I knew Warren before she ran for president, and I loved her. And then like when I was working with her on the campaign, it was like my mama and my daddy took me down to the park, and we've done. I was like, who are you?
But wasn't this the mayor? I mean, the mayor now. Well, the prime like Zohran,
our future mayor.
a future mayor. Okay, here's the thing. Didn't he like become like really big because he was rapping and taking untraditional routes?
Exactly. And I think that is the key for Democrats, yet they're pushing all the way back. So both Republicans and Trump, he's our new boogeyman, but the Democrats are like, how do we stop this? And I'm like, stop what? Winning? Do you want to stop winning? Because we just saw how to win. And it's by putting people first. It's by telling people that we believe they should be able to pay their bills and eat food and go to school and take the bus. Like, it's not that hard. It's really not that hard.
Yeah.
Well, and I think specifically it's like about speaking to what you said, which is like some sort of authenticity that breaks through politics, because we are a smart people now in the fact that we have the internet at our fingertips the whole time. We can know how every candidate ever won what they did and what they used that power for. So I think, not even I think, we as a country, the majority of our country voted Donald Trump in at least once.
At least once.
Yeah, specifically because people wanted to see something that wasn't politicians lying and telling them the same things. I think that's what's really hard, is there's this idea of like having to play the game once you get your foot in that door, having to do what is right for the mass amount of people. But what is really inspiring to people now is somebody who's also just sick
what
of
if I
the bullshit. Yeah, and even if they don't get it right all the time, even if they're a little too radical in some ways or a little too light-footed in others, people are hungry to have somebody address them at a human level and be like, you know what? Instead of just using all my words at you, I'm going to be like, look at this here.
And say something that's just
here.
true and real, and we can all identify it. And it's not jargon, and it's not folks, hey, folks, I want you to come. It's just, let's be real people again. And I think what he's proving is that's what people want. And anyways, I think that's all we have time for today. I think we want to go have our little July 4th barbecues and listen to Beyonce and pretend that America is great.
Whatever, I love it. I wanna reclaim America. My incentive for this month is, faggots, let's take over red, white, and blue. Let us make them hate red, white, and blue because of how much we love it.
You know what? Like, we really did take the rainbow. You have that back. We're gonna take red, white, and blue. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll see y'all all month in the Stars and Spangled.
Well, I'm very, very excited for when we do come back, though. We have a special guest, don't we, Evie?
Evie.
Oh, I'm literally so excited. I can't believe I get to say this. Okay, y'all. Next week, I'll be interviewing one of my soul inspirations, somebody whose music actually really did keep me rooted to myself in a time when I needed it most, and somebody that you love for not having to slap a bitch today. Rico Nasty.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Don't fuck that up, Evie.
I'm actually going to do my homework. And by that, I mean just like smoke a blunt and put on her album and be like, yeah.
That is the way to do it. That is the way to do it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, until next time, y'all, stay messy, stay obsessed, and of course, stay high key.
Bye.
Adios.